Hi, I'm Jaffe Riddle, and I'm really excited to show off this electronic instrument that I made. It's not completely finished, and it could have been designed and constructed with way more care, but for now, this prototype is totally playable, and it's pretty fun as well. I don't have an official name for it, but I've been referring to it as a tape speed keyboard, which seems fitting because it's a keyboard that controls the speed of a cassette tape. That's essentially all it does, but that's enough to make it a musical instrument, provided that what's on the tape is a sound that's tonal. You see, when it comes to sound waves, speed and pitch are essentially one and the same. Simply put, with this machine, the faster the tape moves, the higher the pitch will be. I originally thought of this idea back in 2007, I believe, and then it only took me 18 years to build it. To be fair, it only took that long because it always occupied a really low spot on my priority list, and because the project laid very much outside of my areas of expertise. I don't really know how to do electronics or physical design very well. Still, the idea naggingly persisted in my head, so I felt compelled to do it, even if it took this long. Before I get too far into this, I can hear a bunch of voices shouting,
"That's just like a mellotron!"
And it is, sort of. Mellotrons use a separate strip of audio tape for each key. This device uses just a single piece of tape, and each key has to share it. Because of this, it's a monophonic instrument. And I use quotes because while only one key can be pressed at a time, the sound can be anything that can be recorded to tape, including a polyphonic sound. We'll talk more about that later. Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't really have the skills and experience to build this thing on my own. So I asked my dad for help. He has a background in electronics, not analog audio circuitry, but at least enough general knowledge in the field to help get something like this off the ground, and he was happy to help. But to rewind a bit, when the idea for this instrument first popped into my head, I envisioned it more like this. I was going to make these little audio tape loop wheels that could pop onto the shaft of a motor. Each wheel would have a different tone, and a keyboard would control the speed of the motor. Yes, this totally works in theory, but why reinvent the wheel, so to speak? Why not just use an already existing way of moving tape across a magnetic head, like a tape deck? I thought I was being really smart by buying one of those classic Library of Congress tape players, a favorite among tape music enthusiasts. It seemed like the perfect candidate. It had built-in tape speed controls, so I knew it was flexible in that regard. And it could even play either side of the tape with the flip of a switch. Ooh, I could put a different tone on each side of the tape and switch between them at will. It did lack the ability to record, but I thought the other perks would outweigh that missing feature. Well, it turned out that trying to modify this tape player's circuitry, as well as introduce new circuits into it, was a completely hopeless task for my dad and I. It was just too interconnected and complicated to understand. We'd do something in one section, and then something over in another would break. So after hitting just about every roadblock, I finally decided to just rip out all the electronics and keep nothing but the tape transport section. I mean, why try and fight this thing when I could just buy a small tape head amplifier and control the motor on a completely separate circuit? So in hindsight, probably any tape deck would have worked, and it would probably have been less expensive as well. These particular decks are not getting any cheaper with age. Now I just had to sacrifice a keyboard, and meticulously install little trim pots for every single key. You see, each key basically lets a different amount of voltage flow to the motor. Every key has to be tuned individually. The process was kinda like tuning an acoustic piano, only with little pots rather than metal pegs. First, I made a test tape with just a pure tone on it. Then I pulled out a normal keyboard to use as a reference for matching frequencies. I'd place a weight on a key and match my keyboard's key by ear, jotting down the amount of resistance. It took a while, but at least it was something I only had to do once. Or actually more like 4 times. Anytime there was a change made to any of the circuits and any of the voltages changed, the whole keyboard would need to be retuned. The next thing to address was the motor. The one in my deck was failing, and even if it weren't, it wasn't really rated for the range of speeds I wanted to run it at. So I bought a different motor, with the specs to cover the amount of octaves on the keyboard. This one was rated for a different voltage, so I had to retune the entire keyboard yet again. But with the new motor in place and all the keys tuned again, I had a real instrument that I could play. However, it wasn't easy to play musically. Changing the speed of this kind of motor is really slow. I knew this would be the case. I was expecting a healthy amount of built-in portamento to be a feature, but having the notes always spin up and spin down when pushing the keys just sounded goofy. It was hard to be rhythmic with it while still being melodic. So I had a thought. What if there were a way to make it more rhythmic by using a momentary switch to turn on the audio? I could press that rhythmically while keeping the motor going at various speeds. I decided to just use 2 keys on both ends of the keyboard for that purpose. Keys that enabled the audio. Key enablers. Keeblers. That's the actual term that my dad and I started using to refer to them. Since this tape deck was rather unique in that its playhead spanned across the whole width of the tape, one Keebler could play side A of the tape, and one could play side B of the tape. 2 different tones. I could stick a major chord on one side of the tape and a minor chord on the other side, for instance. Both sides at once, too. Side A, side A, side B, side B, side A, side A. Now, this rhythmic ability is pretty crude. I mean, it's just on and off. But what if there were percussive envelopes? So I did some research and found a chip that could do ADSR. I could just wire that into the system and put a bunch of slider pots to control all those values. I've already proved that I'm barely capable of working on this project, and now I'm gonna make it more complicated? I came to my senses and decided that I'd rather have a working instrument now than spend another 5 years of avoiding an intimidating electronics project sitting in a box in my closet. I told myself, I can always make a version 2 at some point. For now, I have this working prototype, and it's fun to play, and it's weird, and there's no other keyboard quite like it as far as I know. But most importantly, I've reached a stopping place, at least for the time being. And let's be clear, there's nothing that this keyboard does that couldn't be done better with a modern digital sampler plus the right software. But that's not the point. There's something about the directness of it that just feels special to me. It's an entirely analog system, plus it comes with its own set of quirks and limitations that really give it its own identity. Am I the first person to ever hook up a keyboard to a tape deck in this manner? I don't know. And I don't really care. It just feels good to act on that little spark that I had so many years ago. So, there are still some things left to do. First off, I haven't installed a volume control yet, so you have to adjust the level on whatever you plug it into. Second, there needs to be a little filter circuit to stop pops and clicks from occurring when you start and stop the audio. Third, currently the process for making a tape with sounds on it takes a long time. It's passive time, but even still, the whole cassette needs to be filled on both sides with a sound. Maybe looping tapes are the way to go. The only issue with those is that there's always a little gap in the loop. But maybe I could live with that if it's a long enough loop to make that an infrequent occurrence. Fourth, the keyboard and the tape deck don't match aesthetically, and they don't have their own visual theme. I was thinking of something like this. Fifth, it would probably be a good idea to release some kind of schematic in case someone else wants to copy this idea and do a better job than I did. It could definitely be improved in so many ways by someone who knew what they were doing. And then there are some things that I just should have done differently. This project, while moving glacially slow, never actually went that far backwards at any point. After learning things along the way, I should have started over a number of times. I should have used a different tape deck. A deck that could actually record at all sorts of different speeds and then play back those recordings musically at all sorts of pitches would be so much cooler than just this deck that can only play and not record. But what about the 2 sides of the tape for 2 sounds? Well, that's just easily solved by using a stereo deck, left and right channels. Then 2 tones could be on each side of a single tape, instead of just one. For this project, I wanted to keep everything completely analog. But I can't deny that it would also be really cool to produce a similar instrument that could have its motor speed varied by MIDI input. Just imagine all the different ways to control the tape speed. I could even control it with my MIDI-outfitted guitar, which will hopefully be the subject of another video in the future. That said, it can go the other way, with the right equipment. My MIDI guitar hardware does a pretty good job of detecting notes from a normal audio signal, so I can plug the keyboard into it and get whatever sound I want. While that's cool, it just turns this unique instrument into basically any monophonic keyboard with slow portamento that can't be turned off. It no longer has a voice of its own at that point. So I find it more rewarding to stick with the original idea, putting some sounds on a tape and then controlling the speed of that tape with a keyboard. Thank you for watching and listening. See me next time.